You're listening to A Flair for the Curious. On today's podcast, we talk to Monica Muñiz.
Yoga gave me my first window into appreciating my body, appreciating what it's capable of, appreciating how it functions, like just even thinking about it.
Hey everybody, thanks for checking out the show. On today's episode of A Flair for the Curious, I chat with my friend Monica Muñiz about yoga, self-love and acceptance, inclusivity, as well as Puerto Rico, shifting power dynamics, and creative expression. Monica is a Los Angeles-based yoga teacher who's been studying and practicing yoga for over 20 years. Having trained with dozens of prominent teachers, Monica shares her wisdom and love of the practice at two local studios, Hot Yoga Claremont and the Yoga Cove in Monrovia. She works with students at all levels, but one of her favorite things to do is to help people who are new to the practice find a way in that works for them. I had so much fun chatting with Monica, and I think that this conversation will have something for everyone in it, whether you practice yoga or not, whether you're a long-term practitioner or you're just getting started. Monica was born and raised in Puerto Rico before going to school in Boston and transferring to California, and we get into some discussion about the recent events in Puerto Rico as well as colonization, culture, and independence. Towards the end of the conversation, we touch on creative expression, as Monica also likes to make jewelry as a fun and creative outlet. Speaking of being creative, the music featured on today's episode was created by Monica's husband, Michael Radford. Thanks, Mike! But before we jump into the episode, I'd like to take a moment to talk about the breathing exercise that Monica and I did before we started recording, since I mentioned it at the start of the episode without any real explanation. In a future episode, I'll be talking with a breathwork facilitator and you'll get more in-depth information, but I just wanted to touch on it in brief here. So, breathwork and breathing exercises can be really powerful and transformative, and often clear up or open physical, emotional, and energetic blockages. These breathing techniques have been part of healing modalities and the human experience since ancient times in various cultures, but recent or contemporary approaches can be found in the works of people like Stanislav Grof and his holotropic breathwork, Leonard Orr and his rebirthing technique, or the more popular Iceman Wim Hof, who is a Dutchman that developed the Wim Hof method, which people are finding super accessible since there's an app and plenty of videos to learn from. So what Monica and I did was we got comfortable and laid out on a mat, and she put on a playlist to facilitate the experience and help us to know when we got to 15 minutes. Then we did a 3-part breath of filling the belly, filling the chest, and then releasing. I chose to breathe through the mouth. Some people prefer the nose. But whichever you choose, just stick with that for both your in and out breaths if you decide to do this at home. We started in unison, but then we found our own rhythms. It sounded kind of like this. After about 15 minutes, she cued me to switch to normal or restorative breathing, and after about maybe another 5 or 10 of cooling down, we got up and talked about the experience before recording this podcast episode. Methods like Wim Hof that I practice go in shorter, maybe 5-minute rounds, so the full 15 can be, in contrast, a bit more intense, and it was for me. It's common the first few times that someone tries this to have your hands tighten up into what might feel like a lobster claw. Even your face and lips might tighten up. It's a little bit awkward at first, but totally normal, and something that I had experienced in the past, so I knew to expect it. People who practice this continuously, eventually that goes away, and I think that has something to do with the blockages being cleared up. So I don't want to get into all the benefits and reasons to do these kind of techniques, but just lightly touch on what we did so you know what is out there and what we did that I was referencing in the beginning of the episode. Feel free to reach out if you're interested in learning more or look up the names that I mentioned. There's also a guy in Chicago named John Hooks, Jahn Hooks, that trained with Leonard Orr that I follow and recommend. He also puts out amazing hip-hop under the name Illuminati Congo. Okay, that's enough for this intro. I want to get to the conversation with Monica, but any links that you might need are at aflairforthecurious.com or in the show notes to this episode. All right, settle in, take a deep breath, gently let it go, and enjoy this chat with Monica Muñiz. Okay, Monica, thank you so much for joining us today.
It is an absolute pleasure to be here with you, Anthony.
Monica Muñiz. Can you say your last name for me?
Muñiz, you said it
Muñiz?
very well.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. Straightforward. So we just finished doing some breathing exercises, and I feel much more settled into the space now, grounded. Good. This is great.
Good.
Yeah.
I feel good too.
having friends who practice different modalities of fun things, it's always fun to explore and try these things. So super glad we could start off like that. So before we get into any fun, deep topics, let's just meet you. Who are you? How'd you get to where you are today, and a little bit about your background?
Well, I am Monica Muñiz. I was born in Puerto Rico, and I lived there until I went to college. I went to Boston for 2 years, then I transferred, came to California. I was an actress for a while, and then I discovered yoga, and I went through a big process. I don't know if I talk a lot about that, but it was a huge life shift. I guess I went from an industry where I always felt like I wasn't good enough. My body wasn't good enough. My accent wasn't good enough. I wasn't Latina enough, or I was too Latina. I wasn't Caucasian enough, but I wasn't really like Hispanic looking. And there was a lot of not fitting into boxes and feeling like, I took that very personally, like I'm just not good for this. Right. And especially with my body, I had a lot of body image issues growing up. I have pictures of myself in high school, all my friends in their bikinis, and next to them, there I am with a big baggy t-shirt and my shorts. I'm like, I wasn't even that heavy, but I used to feel like a super obese person, and I just did not like my body in any way. I lived from my head up for most of my teenage years. I used to feel like, oh, it doesn't matter what's on the outside. It's all about what's on the inside, and not really seeing that it's all connected and it's a big reflection, and that caring for your body is actually one way to start feeling good about it.
Yeah.
And so yoga gave me my first window into appreciating my body, appreciating what it's capable of, appreciating how it functions, like just even thinking about it. And after about a year and some months of practicing, I was in a very transitional place with my coffee shop job and trying to become a bartender and trying to figure out what kind of job I could do where I could still go to auditions and maintain my yoga career aspirations. And I went to a fake audition. That Screen Actors Guild was offering to hone your skills and give you some feedback. And the feedback was life-changing. I thought, oh, my acting, I got to prepare and do my scene. And after the scene was done, I'm waiting for that feedback about the scene. And everybody's like, oh, yeah, the acting was pretty good. But that interview really sucked. I was like, what? The interview? I didn't even know they were recording that. And so what they pointed out was that every question that was meant to maybe trigger something in you, like, what was the last job you did? And what have you been doing lately? And just make you feel like you need to be up on your shit, you know? Can we curse?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And, I clicked the explicit box, so we're A-okay. Not a family show.
And I was like, oh, well, I was doing a lot of yoga. I had just met my now husband, who was my boyfriend at the time, and I was spending a lot of time with him. And I was framing it all with this idea that I wasn't doing what I was supposed to do. Like, oh yeah, all this is happening in my life. There's this amazing yoga. There's this amazing boyfriend. I'm having so much fun. All these things are coming into my life. And yet I felt like, well, that's all good and everything, but what I really want is that. And I'm not getting that. So I was unhappy. And after that audition, and there were other people there that were older than me. I was 23 and I thought like I was so old. I was like, my time has passed. And here's like 30-year-old women and 40-year-old women deciding to act 2 weeks ago. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I got home. I spent 2 days in bed. I couldn't move. I was just crying. And what I was realizing was that I wasn't flowing with life. I wasn't opening up to what life was offering me. I was just resisting it and half living that because it wasn't what I had in my mind and I had determined that I wanted. And the interesting thing about it is that the whole acting thing had already become not what I wanted. But I had said that's what I was going to do. I told my family that's what I was going to do. I had all this pressure inside myself. Nobody else was putting it on me. It was me. But I felt like, oh no, I've already said I'm going to do this. I got to do this.
It's hard to be in your early 20s.
Right. Oh my gosh. And so that's when I decided, I actually shared with my yoga teacher then, who is now my friend Erin, shared with her my dilemma and telling her I don't know what to do. And she was like, well, why don't you teach yoga? And I looked at her like, what? That's possible? Even though she was just somebody like me and she was teaching yoga. And for me, in my brain, I still thought I had to be some kind of Indian guru. So I was like, oh, actually, maybe that's a good idea. So I went to training and I told my agents at the time, I was like, I'm going to take a year off. It's been 17. Never went back, never looked back. And really moving from that industry where I never felt good enough, my body wasn't good enough, I didn't feel like my acting was good enough, whatever it was, moving into a place where it was all about loving yourself and it was all about accepting yourself and it was all about looking for what's good. And for the first time in my life, I remember this moment like it was yesterday. And it was Bikram yoga, and you have to do it in front of a mirror for 90 minutes looking at yourself. First few months, all I could see was the parts I hated. Oh, my big hips, my butt, my everything, all the rolls. I didn't like anything. And one day, I actually saw myself as if I was looking at somebody else. I actually was able to distance myself enough to see myself like I'm looking at you. And I saw for the first time ever my own beauty.
Wow.
And I realized, I saw my grandma's cheekbones. I saw my heritage. I saw where I come from.
Wow.
And I was like, oh my gosh, I am beautiful. And 23 years of my life, I never felt that. So that was a big aha moment to like, this is the right path for me. And then teaching, just being able to help other students and just seeing them help me with my practice. Like it was just like a give and take. I've never felt like a teacher, like I was saying before. I still feel like I'm just a student, but being able to be participant in somebody else's journey of self-discovery, self-empowerment, I'm eternally grateful for that.
Wow. That's great. Thank you. So what had stood out to me, what you said, what was the big shift? You said you weren't flowing with your life, right? You were kind of forcing, you had an idea of what you wanted to do, and you were trying to fit that block into the circle hole, and it just wasn't working.
Exactly.
So lately I've been really toying with the idea. So we know about flow states and how when you're in a flow state, you're in the flow of it. So my yoga teacher, when I did my YTT, he said, our goal is to work towards effortless effort. Right. And that's, to me, that's like a flow state. That's like a river. The river is forging its way, but it's not putting forth any effort. It's letting gravity do all the work, and it's carving out the Grand Canyon and all the things that rivers do.
That's such a good visual. Yeah.
Yeah. So I've been working lately with making my life a flow state so that all of my decisions are in what some call the Tao. Like they say, Tao is the watercourse way, the flow. People talk about it in harmony with nature and things like this. So in trying to listen to what is intuitively coming up for me, and good or bad, what should I do? And really kind of going with the flow in a different way that is less intellectual, but still using my discernment and everything I've learned in terms of information and knowledge, using that, but also allowing the flow of my natural being to arise and somewhat dictate or at least influence my choices. That's an expression of what this podcast is. For so long, I felt like I needed to write a book, and I still may, or do something in some specific way. And it didn't occur to me that, making a podcast, I get to be a part of the conversation and talk to all my friends about all the cool stuff they're doing. And it just felt so organic and so much like a flow, and something that, I don't want to go too far off topic, but this flow state and this pulling out things that are organic in our lives. So like, what is the placebo effect? How do we tap into our own natural healing ability? And there's these things we can do that seem a little bit beyond what we understand, but they're just out of reach. And if we soften up to them a little bit, and we listen a little bit more openly to what's coming up within us, it's not so much effort. And I'm finding effortless effort to be the case in my day-to-day a lot more regularly. I mean, I still have difficulties, and I still get frustrated when my dog barks at the guy across the street when I'm walking him or whatever. But ultimately, like my bigger decisions, like the small day-to-day stuff, I'm still working with my neuroses, but the bigger decisions are just not a big deal anymore. Like I told you, I'm considering, I'm about to graduate I'm entering senior year. Do I go to grad school or not? I don't think it's such a big decision. Whatever I do, I know it's going to work out.
Right. I have no doubt. I have no doubt. That's very interesting. You said that the placebo effect. I'm curious about what you mean by that.
So the placebo effect, you take a sugar pill and you heal.
I mean,
right?
I know what it is, but okay, keep going.
So you have to trick yourself into healing, right?
Right.
How can we just heal
without having to take a sugar pill.
Right.
How can we access that
like you
state?
believe it's going to happen so much it just happens.
Yeah. So like a flow state comes from when typically, generally speaking, you have mastered your craft. Say you're cooking, so you're in a kitchen and you're cooking up 10 plates and you're not even giving a single thought to any of it and everything's coming out perfectly and you're just in the flow of it and everything's coming and going and you're just in the flow. And that's because you've mastered your craft. But you don't necessarily have to spend 10,000 hours mastering your craft to find that flow state.
Right.
It's natural. It's organic. It's the river.
Well, and can I take pause there and say that I think that maybe even after you've cooked 10,000 hours and you're like really good at it, you're still going to make a mistake sometimes. And there's still going to be something that spills and something that burns and you're still in your flow state, right? Like to think that everything's going to come out perfect could be a dangerous idea, to think that if I'm in my flow state, then nothing can go wrong.
No,
right?
it's I guess it's what they do in some forms of martial arts. If somebody attacks you, you use their own momentum to keep them moving. So yeah, when you're in the flow of what is, things that you might typically take in as a problem or bad or wrong, you can work with and through your alchemical flow state, you transmute it into something great.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I love that idea of like, I see what you mean. And I see that person that is in that flow state in the kitchen, what they do is, they use that mistake and they try to make something out of it, or they start over without feeling like they're a failure, right? I think that's the biggest thing with being in flow state is that you don't take it so personally, where you understand that you are working with a bigger energy, that it's not all up to us, right? That there's going to be things out of our control that are going to come into play, and to not take that as a signal of personal failure, or like we're not good enough. That's my
absolutely.
My take on that.
I don't know about your experience, but for me, when I'm in a state of flow, the personal aspect is somewhat removed.
I see that.
I'm not really thinking about me. I'm not taking it personally. If we're all working together and you make a mistake, I'm definitely not going to take it personally. I'm going to flow with it, right?
Right.
So I feel a little bit removed from that personal aspect that forces you to intellectualize things and would, in essence, remove you from that flow state if you gave into that temptation.
Right.
Fell back into that over analytical way of thinking.
Looking for blame and looking for
blame or just even reasoning.
Right.
Like it's really
I understand why.
Yeah, like what is that like something has fallen and needs to be picked up. You don't need to understand gravity in this moment. You know, like it's the parable of the arrow in Buddhism.
How did that fall? I thought I put it in the right spot.
Exactly. So
I love that.
So yeah, I think learning to listen to ourselves, which yoga is extremely helpful for me at least, has allowed my life to become more of a flow. And I know we were talking about, I've had a home practice now for about a year and a half. And while I can definitely probably go for a tune-up and come in and see a teacher, I can use some good alignment cues. Allowing me to have that time to myself has let me really listen quietly. I'm not getting any cues from a teacher or, okay, it's time to leave the studio now.
Right.
I can really sit when I need to sit or push it when I want to push it in different ways. And the listening has allowed me so much of a deeper connection to my body, which I really neglected when I started meditating. I thought it was all about being up in the head.
Right.
Little did I know that everything's connected. So now I'm understanding my body more patient with it. It teaches me to listen to myself, which helps me to listen to the seemingly external environment, and the external and internal become just all part of the flow, and things are, I'm happy to say, getting a little more smooth in my turbulent life. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think that idea of being able to listen, when you said that word quietly, that's huge, because you're right. In a group setting, there's something you get that you don't get when you're alone. But that capacity, I remember even in the Bikram yoga context, they used to have these silent classes because it's the same routine. So once you know the routine, so we would get together and just have the class in silence. And those were my favorites because you really did I could actually hear my own breath and I could actually feel what was going on in my body. And I already had a lot of the cues in my mind at that point. So I can totally relate to that. Yeah.
I think that makes me think of the conversation I've often heard come up about whether or not to play music in a yoga class. And there can be a lot of fun to be had with that, but there's definitely something special about being able to hear your breath or if the teacher can hear when you were having difficulty with your breath and they can come offer you some guidance or assistance.
Right.
Things like that. It's a much more intimate when we can hear what we are each experiencing.
And it's really funny because my whole yoga career, I never played with music. And it's only in the last few years I've actually incorporated a little music into my classes. And I have it really low and it's kind of in the background. But I was finding in the classes that I was attending that had music that there was, I felt like something was carrying me a little bit more. There was a sense of, in the moments of challenge, the music was there to kind of give me a little bit of lift. And I just enjoyed it. And I was like, oh, I guess I'll play with that. One of the things I've made very clear to most of my students, especially in my other yoga classes, the flow classes, the quote unquote vinyasa, which I called aligned flow because I don't like the whole fast moving vinyasa world. And I forgot what I was going to say.
That's okay.
Yeah.
So the alignment and the vinyasa. So let's
go back.
Let's back it up a little bit. So you said you came to yoga, all these things, but today your titles. You teach yoga at a couple different places. One of them is a hot yoga.
Yes, I teach
center.
at Hot Yoga Claremont, and I teach. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, and I teach at Yoga Cove in Monrovia.
Great. So that's where I met you, Yoga Cove in Monrovia.
Yes.
Love that place. And the Hot Yoga Claremont used to be a Bikram yoga.
Yes.
And so the styles that you are certified in, you're EYRT 500 in both Bikram and Anusara.
Well, Bikram doesn't really go with the Yoga Alliance thing. But I stopped paying to Yoga Alliance recently.
Thank goodness. Yeah.
I don't agree with necessarily them taking money for something that I didn't feel I didn't need it at this point, but I trained in Anusara mainly. I studied with a lot of the Anusara teachers that now have gone off and done their whole other thing, which is pretty impressive and awesome. I studied with Noah Mazet, Tara Judell, Sienna Sherman, Amy Politi, just to name a few.
Wow.
Russ Rayburn, trying to think of the teachers that I did training with, Tiffany Frazier. I really felt very lucky. Mark Holzman. Obviously, my main teacher that I feel helped me individually and personally with my practice is Alma White, who is the owner of Yoga Cove. She's always been a mentor to me, and I think she took my practice to a different level at a time when I needed that. And then, of course, there's been hundreds of other teachers along the way, but just in terms of taking trainings, those were the main trainings, yeah.
Yeah.
But what I was going to say is I made very clear to my students, when I picked up teaching again, because I took a year off for a shoulder injury, and I readdressed my relationship to the practice, especially to the flow practice, was that my classes are viable to change, and I'm not going to stick to an idea of what it's supposed to be. And so one day you'll come and maybe that day we're doing like a lot of core and we're using the sandbags and building some strength. And the next time it might be like mostly restorative and yin. And I like to mix it up. Like, I feel like I like to read the room, see who shows up, what the day is feeling like. And so I like that idea of not coming in knowing what you're going to get, which is a different situation than Bikram, right? I still teach those classes and people know what they're coming for that. And there's something very valuable in knowing what you're going to go through and showing up. I love that. But also having those classes where we are more like able to go with what we're feeling. I'm able to read the room, how people are moving, what's needed. I come in with a plan and maybe like 80% of the time I don't follow it. Like I'll just end up doing something else. But I still to this day come in with at least an idea of what I want to work on. I always feel more confident if I've given it some thought.
Yeah. And that's been my experience in your classes too. So I've gone to the dynamic classes, not the set sequence class. Right. And yeah, I hear you when you talk to us in the beginning and kind of see how it plays out. And maybe we change it up in the middle. You're like, oh, I was going to do this, but let's do this instead. And I like it. I've fallen back to a set, pretty daily, consistent, same practice, but you obviously attract different kinds of people in different classes. Yeah. And you have students showing up to both. So people like different things at different times. And
what's accessible to people at different times is different. Yes. And I think that we all need a little bit different practice at different times. So there was a time Bikram was exactly right for me. I needed that set sequence just to be able to see my own progress. Mm-hmm. I think I wouldn't have stuck with it if it was new every time. If I had started in a vinyasa class, I might have been like, oh, I'm not seeing the progress, right? And the fact that I started in Bikram Yoga Pasadena, and they had a 10 days for $20 intro, and I did 9 days of those 10 days. And in those 9 days, I could actually see physical progress. I was like, oh, I couldn't touch my toes, and now I can. Oh, wait, I can. Oh, you mean I can actually get better at this? And I'm not kidding when I say I know I was 23. I should have learned this a long time before. But I really learned, like, oh, you don't have to already naturally be good at something. You can actually improve if you practice. And then I was like, well, let me see if I can learn how to juggle. And I can kind of juggle now.
Nice.
Like, okay.
I think that was maybe one of the biggest lessons I learned around that age too. Maybe I was 19 or 20, and I was in a serious relationship, and we were having struggles, and I identified something that I was doing that I didn't like, and I made an effort to change it, and I changed it, and I was like, holy shit,
yes.
I'm capable of change. This changes everything.
Yes.
And from that point on, I've meticulously tried to better myself. No,
Yeah.
It's a balance. It's a balance.
It is.
So you trained in Anusara and Bikram, and Bikram is a set sequence. It's hot yoga. It's a standing sequence, so you're not bearing weight on your arms. So it's more accessible to some people, despite the intensity of the heat.
Exactly. It's all standing and floor poses, no headstand, no arm balances. No.
Mm-hmm.
So it is like you get people that have never worked out in their life. They could be in their 60s, 70s. They try yoga for the first time, and it is accessible. A form of the postures that we teach is going to be doable.
Nice.
And I love working with people like that. I love my favorite. I feel like my gift is working with beginners.
Mm-hmm.
Because it is that moment of like, aha, oh, wait, this isn't just for those yogis I see on Instagram. And like people feel so intimidated by yoga. And that's one of my goals is to demystify yoga, demystify the idea, or like make it less intimidating, and to remember that, you know, we all have a body and we all have a yoga body. Like,
I think there's a big conversation that's super important right now happening in a lot of circles about inclusivity.
Yes.
And using the right language. Like, not everybody can do that with their body, so make sure you're articulating your posture requests in an appropriate way to make everybody feel included.
Yes.
Um,
And that comes with practice as a teacher, I think. I mean, it's great if you can take a training for that. I think that's starting to happen.
Mm-hmm.
I know Diane Bondi. She's a woman I got to train together with. We went to Amy Politi's training together, and she's amazing because she has done a whole training on inclusivity for bigger bodies, and she happens to be Black as well, so inclusivity in all ways.
Mm-hmm.
I really admire that because it takes a while as a teacher to learn how to modify things for bodies that are not just like everybody else, you know. And like some people come in, they have a shorter leg than the other leg, or like they have that to be able to make the room work for everybody and make everybody feel like wherever they are, they can make some progress for themselves, and that they're okay where they are. They don't even need to get anywhere. Just being where you are and being okay with that. That's huge to me.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was a powerful shift in my practice when that was pointed out to me. Like, oh, you know what? Like, not everybody's body is going to look like the perfect form of the posture. It was pointed out to me, you know, you can work for a couple months and start to stretch your muscles. You can work for a couple years and start to get into your fascia, but your bones are never going to change. So some people are physically never going to be able to make their heels come all the way down in downward dog or things like this.
Right.
For some people, it doesn't matter how long you practice and try.
Right. No, exactly.
And so
like,
that just
something like
me.
Garudasana, eagle pose, which we teach in Bikram, is one of those. It's like the length of your limbs for your shoulders, to be able to wrap your leg around the other one, to wrap the elbows. I see it every day.
Is that the
I mean,
issue
the
that keeps
length
people
are
from doing
also,
it?
if you have a little bit thicker thighs, there's times when I've been a little heavier and I can't get my leg around, and there's times I'm a little thinner, I can. And it's just like, even a few inches can make a difference there. So yeah, the idea that everybody can access every pose is definitely debunked. I think in most yoga communities, but people still come in with that idea. They look at the poster, they look at the Instagram thing, they're like, yogi see, yogi do.
Yeah.
You know, there's even a whole page called that. And I follow it. I enjoy looking at the cool shapes they can create. But yeah, I don't try to put myself in those positions most of the time.
Yeah.
Ah.
So I think maybe it's important for long-term practitioners and teachers who may have internalized this understanding of inclusivity to keep talking about it, because as new people come, or people are on the periphery because they're afraid to come, they need to still hear that.
Yeah,
and I think inclusivity doesn't just extend to body shaming. It's also making the practice accessible.
Yes.
So there's I go to this Buddhist university, and they do meditation in the jails, and they're always inviting people to to go and work with the incarcerated peoples, and they want to learn yoga, and there's a prison yoga project, and bringing it to those people in need there, as well as so many other outreach to other underserved populations or people who can't afford the increasing price of a class or a workshop or a teacher training. Another aspect of inclusivity that I've enjoyed experiencing is maybe not everybody wants to be touched. So a lot of teachers now are using tokens or chips that you can flip over when you do or do not want to get an adjustment.
I actually bought those and I have them. I must admit, I tried bringing them in the room a few times and it didn't really take off. So I've stopped bringing them in. But I do, when I have a new person in my class, I'll ask them, are you okay with physical adjustment? Like, just like I ask, do you have an injury?
Yeah.
I'll ask, like, well, how are you feeling? You have an injury, anything I should know about? And I'll be like, are you okay with physical touch? And then that clears it from the beginning. And yeah, I've had a couple of people like, yeah, I prefer not. And then I just give them verbal cues and that works perfect.
Yeah.
I tend to be pretty hands-on considering how a lot of teachers are now. I know in the whole Bikram world, there was a whole like, don't touch the students after a while. But I take it, and it wasn't like that when I went to training in 2002. But I realized it's like, well, they're training 300 people. You can't train 300 people how to touch.
Yeah.
And I was lucky enough that one of my trainings I did with Amy Polity was, I don't know if it was an actual training or just a workshop, but it was like a weekend workshop on physical adjustments. And she was fantastic with that. And so I felt very, back then, I have to say, the Anusara world, there was so much greatness in it because the community was very close-knit, not in an exclusive way. I felt like it was very inclusive. Once you became a part of it, you were welcomed. But that you would travel to go study with this teacher. You would hear about different teachers and what they were doing, and you would travel to study with them. I feel like after the Anusara world disbanded, I feel like more like we're all like floating out in space and we're kind of on my own here. But that also has given us some freedom. And every one of my teacher friends and people that I know have expanded and taken it on to a whole new level. But there was definitely a community aspect that I miss.
Yes.
In terms of, that particular thing about touching, it was a practice that we did a lot of partner work. We learned how to do that. And nowadays in trainings, I don't think that they're taking the time. I don't know. I haven't been to a training in maybe like 5 years, 10.
I did one a couple years ago when I was in India. We did do a lot of partner practice for our adjustments.
Touch with a big
our classes were maybe 30 or 40.
Okay.
So it's small enough, but a big group that we definitely need to partner up. We can't all have teacher time.
Right. And you can practice on each other
and check in and ask questions. There's a small enough group that you could ask questions at the end or during. But I just want to say one more thing about the tokens. I think so. My experience with you in a class, like you're very personable, so you're friends with the students in your class for the most part. They're not huge classes, so you're able to do that. I haven't been out to Claremont, but the Cove, it's a
Cove is definitely
it's a cove.
Tiny, yeah.
It's a cove, right?
Claremont we get like 30 people at the most. 20-25 is average. But for my flow classes, it's smaller. We have a smaller room upstairs, so those are like maybe like 10, 12.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's still small enough that feels very personal.
Yeah.
Yep.
So the thing I wanted to say about the coins is that I think it's not the having the thing that you can flip over is about ongoing consent. It's not about permission at the beginning of the class, because the thing about ongoing consent is it can change moment to moment.
Oh, that's a very good.
In the middle of the class, you can change your mind 10 times if you want, as many times as you want. And so it's not just about the initial consent, but ongoing consent.
Wow, that's a very interesting. I like that.
In the conversation around consent, if you're talking about sexual intimacy, you might say it's okay now, and then we keep going, and you're like, oh, I changed my mind, I don't want to do this, and that's okay.
Right. 100%.
So the same thing applies to the yoga mat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that idea. No. I'm going to give that some thought.
Yeah. But I mean, my experience in your classes is everybody is just, it is that community environment. And I feel, everybody's of course individual and you can't read somebody's mind.
Right.
But I mean, I would tell you, but I'm an outspoken person in a different way than a lot of people are.
Right.
So giving them that option, even if maybe they don't seem like they're enthusiastic about having it, right away, they might
You
actually
never
use
know.
it. And,
Yeah. No, I'm going to think about that. I'll take that in.
Yeah, I just enjoyed seeing that made available to the students in the classes where I experienced it. And it just, definitely made me think about it a lot more.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. So you did Bikram and you've done Anusara, and Anusara is alignment focused. This is something that I've enjoyed from taking your classes. You've got this background in alignment, so some of your cues are a little bit unique and made me think about things in different ways and helped me get into my body. The whole thing about I tend to hunch forward, and you said, bring your chin back, and it brings your chest out, and that has changed my life off the mat.
Oh wow.
Because it's a really interesting alignment cue, and you pointed out to me the wheels, alignment wheels, the
spirals,
like different axes that you should
I don't talk about that as much anymore in my classes. Very interesting. My language has evolved as
I think we talked about it after class one day. I don't think it was in the class.
Just I don't use the words. I don't say inner spiral, outer spiral. We used to use the words a lot. And in that sense,
Anusara vocabulary?
Yes. And the loops, we had loops.
That's what the word was.
Loops,
spiral loops, that's what I was thinking of.
And I do have to say, looking back on it, I do see how that was a little bit exclusive in the sense that if you didn't know what the teacher was talking about and she's like, oh, inner spiral your thighs, you'd be like, what the heck is that? Or like outer spiral your arms. And so I try to talk about rotation, external and internal rotation. I try to talk about, and I was just talking about this on my class on Tuesday, right? Like we're just maps. The teacher's like a GPS lady. I'm just saying, okay, this is what the map is saying. I'm saying maybe try an external rotation of the arm, see if that frees your shoulders a little bit when the arms are overhead. Now, is that going to be the same for everybody? No. And you're the person that's in the driver's seat. You're the person that has your foot on the gas and the brake. And hey, if the GPS tells me to turn right and there's a building, I'm not going to turn right. Like you use your own judgment. And my goal as a teacher is to empower students to learn to feel their bodies enough to be able to know when it's appropriate to do more or less of whatever action I'm asking them to do. But inevitably, when you first start out, I find most people don't come in with a map of their own body internally. I certainly didn't have that. So I had no idea if my body was doing what the teacher was asking me to do or not, which was the good thing about having a mirror at first, but it's a double-edged sword because you only see the front and the back body was like, oh my gosh, all sorts of messed up, but I didn't know, right? Like once I started to learn all those loops and spirals, and it was enlightening because I got to understand the biomechanics of the body in a new way that I hadn't been introduced to just from the Bikram practice. Bikram is very pushy. It's go, push more.
Yeah.
And I did that for a long time until I ended up like with sciatica and knee pain and low back pain in my 20s. I was like, wait a minute, I'm practicing 5 days a week and I'm walking with a limp. There's something wrong. And it was the extreme, the locking of the joints, that kind of stuff. So when I teach now, I'm very lucky that I teach at a place where they totally allow me to teach with the incorporation of the alignment and the awareness of the biomechanics and how the body functions better.
Yeah.
Because for me, at least, when I stopped locking my knee, my low back felt better and my sciatica cleared up. And like, okay, so there's something there. And of course, now I've researched and definitely better not to lock your standing joints.
Yeah.
Depending, right? Let's say this. If you're a dancer, you're somebody that's been strengthening your muscles and your calves all your life, and then you lock your knee and you stand on your point, maybe you're fine, right? Like not everybody's going to be hurt by locking their knee, but I can guarantee you if you're coming in with not a lot of physical strength, not a lot of awareness, and you're just sitting on your joints, that's going to not be great.
Yeah. And I think... Yeah, you made a good point about people don't usually come into the class with a map of their own body, and I know that was my experience. I didn't know, I played flag football as a kid in school and did some like weightlifting in my 20s, and that's about all I had going on for me. So yeah, I came in with a can-do attitude, and I wanted to be pushed, and as I softened into the practice and started to listen, I learned what is right and what's not right, and it's an ongoing conversation.
Right, it never ends.
And I don't fancy myself a yoga teacher, but I've led classes before, usually by requests from other students in my school. And I'll say from the very beginning, like, I'm here giving you instructions, but you are the teacher and your body is going to really be the teacher. So this is a practice about listening to your body, if I tell you to do something, don't turn into that wall, right?
And that's the thing. I appreciate the map. I appreciate giving alignment cues for that reason, because if you don't know, you don't know, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think people come to a class because they want to be led in some ways. They want to be told, and in that process of them figuring themselves out, it's very helpful to have another eye look at you and tell you, oh, you're dipping here,
Yes.
you're sinking there. Like, I know I needed that. I was very lucky to have Alma because she was very hands-on, and I'm a very kinesthetic and visual person, but not that much auditory. So she would tell me 100 times, thighs up, and I was like, I'm there. And then she'd come by and like lift my thighs and be like, oh, got it. Okay, that's thighs up. And so I personally benefited a lot from that kind of physical connection, but I'm also comfortable with touch, right? Like what we were talking about before. There's people that, and you can feel it. I feel like after a while you become pretty sensitive when you just get near someone, if they're welcoming of that or not. And I do notice, I mean, I have several students, I never, ever go near them in that way, you know, because I can just feel there's that little energetic wall. I'm like, I totally respect that.
Yeah.
But
So in going back a little bit to that question of starting out and not really knowing how to know your limits or knowing what you're working with as you bring your body into the room, if you could give your younger self advice with starting out yoga, is there anything that you wish you knew when you were starting that you didn't know?
Yeah, aside from not locking my knees, I think I would say to not, like we were talking about before, to not think that the goal is to look like the poster. To not think like, oh, I'm supposed to look like that. I'm supposed to make my body bend in this shape and make it. And it's like, oh, the goal is to embody myself more fully, to feel myself from the inside in a new way, and to carry myself with more inner support. That's what I always talk about. Like, where are we letting gravity take over in a way that's not helpful? Right? Because sometimes it's great to let gravity take over and let your body, you know, rest in a restorative or a yin yoga class. But in a muscular engagement class where you're trying to like build your strength, and that to me is alignment. Is are you carrying yourself with inner support and buoyancy, or are you sinking into yourself? So I try to not say a blanket statement anymore, like, oh, your shoulders should always be this way or your legs should always turn this way, which I did for a while as a younger teacher. And I'm grateful to be in a place where I don't believe there's a right way for anything. It's an exploration, and we're all going in there exploring together and discovering what we find. And in my own body, it's always changing. I'm 43 now, right? I'm not the body that I was when I was 23. So the advice I would give myself is like, do your best, have fun, but also know that there's going to be some things that may be inaccessible, and that's okay. Yeah. Because I beat myself up for a while once I became a teacher. Like, no, I need to balance in handstand in the middle of the room. And I need to, like, I put a lot of pressure on myself and like doing these things that I saw other teachers do. And it was so impressive. Oh, they could do that. I got to do that. And being okay with the fact that, hey, I was not the gymnast kid. I was not the kid. I was the girl where my friends were playing volleyball and I'd be like smoking the cigarette, like, okay, I'm going to go bring you some lunch and I'm going to take the elevator. I'm not even going up the stairs. So learning to accept who I am, my history, my body, my life, and not want to always be comparing myself to somebody else. Like, I did that a lot at the beginning. So that would be my most important advice to anybody starting out. And I know they say that all the time. It's just about you and your body. Don't compare yourself. But we're all human and we do it. Yeah. And it's taken me a long time to really integrate and internalize that idea that really you're never going to be like anybody else. So stop trying.
Yeah. Do you think there's any specific things that helped you to stop comparing yourself, or any particular tricks? Because I know something like that, like I mentioned to you earlier, when I go to a yoga class, right. Even though I know it's about me and the mat, I'm still looking around the room sometimes. I'm still kind of comparing, even though intellectually I know I don't need to do that. It still happens because, like you said, we're human. But maybe the more time I spend with myself on my home practice, then when I go to a class, I'm not as concerned with that.
Right.
So is there anything that you noticed in your life that was practical that helped you have that shift?
Yeah, it was very, very visceral and real. I had frozen shoulder.
Oh, okay.
I stopped being able to use my arm, and that was pretty not fun.
That'll do it.
Yeah, because there were some things in the Anusara alignment that now I've reversed. So they always talked about shoulder blades on your back, shoulder blades on your back. And it's like, yeah, in certain situations, that's wonderful. But in the overhead plane, when you're doing a handstand or a full wheel, actually your shoulder blades are supposed to move away from your spine. And when you do that movement naturally, that just happens. Mm-hmm. And allowing your trapezius muscles to participate. Like, they don't always have to be relaxed. The glutes don't always have to be relaxed. They play a big role. Like, now I've worked to re-strengthen my glutes. Mm-hmm. I don't depress my shoulders all the time anymore, and so I had to unlearn a lot of stuff. And really, I feel like that's the process of life and yoga, is learning and unlearning, learning and unlearning. The hardest part is letting go of something we've learned. But I think it's the most empowering part, when you're willing to unlearn something and to say, oh, actually, I learned that, but that wasn't the best for me.
Yeah.
Then you open up to learning more. And then maybe I'll learn something, and now later I'll unlearn it again. And that's been the biggest shift for me. That took a year to heal. I mean, I didn't practice any vinyasa for a year. I still did Bikram and I still walked and did exercise, but I didn't put any weight on my arms for a whole year. And I didn't really have to take a whole year. I think I didn't know how to come back to it after I'd healed. And I did a lot of reading and researching and finding, people talking about the shoulder girdle and all that, and be like, oh yeah, I mean, we're lucky nowadays we have the internet. We have so much access to information. So that was one of those things. I was like, oh wait, what if I let my shoulder blades move out? And now I'm like, oh, handstand actually feels great. And so it is like, I still don't balance in the middle of the room, because I'm bottom heavy, right? I got my big hips, my big Puerto Rican butt, and I very easily fall over. And I was, at the time when I got frozen shoulder, I was learning to fall into full wheel. And I think that wasn't great for my shoulder. It's a big thing. And yeah, it might be amazing for somebody else. I encourage my students to try. I let people in my classes, if they want to practice in the middle of the room, they're welcome to. I just don't do it. And I'm okay with that. And so that was a big thing, to be like, oh, I don't have to do that. I don't have to do this thing that I put in my mind that was going to make me a better teacher. I was like, actually, the shoulder helped me to see what it's like to be in a body with pain. Because I really hadn't had that except for the sciatica. And that also taught me to not lock the knee, which is something I had learned in training. I had been telling people for 4 years to do. And I had to stop telling people. I had to quit 2 studios because they were like, you need to follow the dial. I was like, I can't tell somebody something that I know it's injurious for most people. I'm not going to do that. So, and that's why I'm very lucky. I love my Claremont studio, because it is a Bikram-centered studio, but they call it Hot Yoga now. They took off the name. Yeah. And we opened up to a whole bunch of different classes. So we offer everything from restorative to yin to meditation to the slow flow to hot vinyasa. And I really love that, because there's something for everyone. You get the older lady with the limp coming in and be like, oh, I've heard yoga's good. I'm like, yes, come in. Like, it's not like, oh, this is just a hot vinyasa place, you're not welcome, right? Because I'm not putting down the old lady with the limp, right? I'm just saying, like, there's different body types at different stages in their lives. And I feel everybody can benefit from the awareness of breathing consciously, moving the body, getting that circulation flowing, even if that means getting up and down from your chair a few times a day, moving your wrists and circling your ankles. Like, it could be that much, right? It doesn't have to be doing a handstand and a headstand. Yeah. Even though those are so fun. Yeah.
Wow. So interesting. So, I don't know if it's appropriate, but maybe I kind of want to use our time for a little bit of a yoga consultation. So when I was thinking about asking you what you would teach or share with your younger self, I was like, well, what would I tell my younger self if I could?
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
And I would probably tell myself that when they're giving you the cue to engage your core, it's not because they're trying to help you get washboard abs. They actually mean it. So, I've taken on a home practice of modified Ashtanga primary series. And for the first year, I was experiencing all positive growth. My body was getting stronger, more flexible. My breathing was amazing. Was rippling out into all aspects of my life. And then earlier this year, I started to experience more back pain. And, I've had back pain on and off throughout my life, and I've done different things to work with it. Sometimes making it stronger through the proper exercise helped at different times. Sometimes resting it was appropriate. Different things, different times. And what it made me pay attention to is that I wasn't engaging my core in like half the postures. And so engaging your core makes your back safe. It secures everything.
And yet most people don't know how to do that. I didn't really know how to do that. They say like, engage your belly. Like, well, okay, I think I'm doing it. I really honestly only the last like 3 years can I say that I've really been able to focus and strengthen my core in a way that I wasn't able to do just with yoga. Personally, I'm not saying other people can't get it just from yoga. I couldn't. I didn't have that awake enough. And I would suffer from back pain here and there, right? And it really was the HIIT classes. I started doing HIIT, which is a high intensity interval training class. And this one in particular that my friend Vanessa Gomez trained me in and she brought to the studio is core focus, right? So we're doing we do the arms, we do the legs, we do the glutes, but mostly it's a lot of core work. And you get to that point with those like intervals where you're like burning off your core. And it was like, oh, I have never felt that. I've never done enough of this. And now I see a big difference in my yoga practice. And overall, I see a wave of yoga moving towards balancing the flexibility with the strength. Just in general, I think there was an idea of yoga of like, oh, we're just stretching. We just want to get limber and we want to open up our body. And there were a lot of classes that I've been to where it's just like, how far can you go? How long can you make your arm? Like, how far can you touch your toes? Like, it was all about that. And I love the wave that I'm seeing because it's not just my classes, right? I think we're all, whether we're aware of it or not, we're all a part of something greater. And so there's a big wave I see in yoga where they're putting a lot more emphasis on engaging the core, engaging the glutes, like finding that strength, doing exercises that maybe are not a yoga pose, but that are going to build your center to be able to do a yoga pose with more ease and more integrity. And so I think you're 100%. You saw it. You felt it for yourself. More core. And right, it's not about how it looks. It's the support you get from it. It's the ability to carry your trunk. I mean, if you think about it, your rib cage and your pelvis only have those, 5 lumbers to carry it together. And there's all the viscera and all that part that can easily lose support. And gravity's always there. So I think it's a very vulnerable place for most people. And as much as we think we're engaging, like I didn't know how to do it. And I probably for a long time did a lot of planks with my booty up. And, Alma helped me with that a lot. But I think that the capacity to sustain it came more. And even with
came more from doing the extra work on the side?
Exactly. Even with Mula Bandha and the tightening of the floor of the pelvis, I don't think it really got to the level that I feel now. Like I feel like I can engage my transverse abdominis and I can engage my, I feel more each part of my center participating and including the back, right? Including the engagement of the lats and the obliques and not just the low belly pulls up, right? That there's a whole band of movement in different directions of the fibers, and to be able to connect all that, it's not easy. For me, it was like, I called it my black hole for many years because I could feel my legs. I could feel my arms, right? My mind map was starting to wake up there. The core was like the black hole. I was like, where is that part of my body? And now finally with the high intensity training, I do feel that's more awake. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, I can only do so many boat poses. I don't feel like I'm getting any stronger.
Yeah. Honestly, yeah.
Yeah. I think that's something I'm going to look into, whether it's high intensity interval training or some other supplemental core training exercise. Yeah. I think that's going to be helpful for my back. There's this yoga podcast I listen to. You said you're not as much of an auditory learner, so I don't know how much podcasts you listen to. But have you heard Jay Brown Yoga Talks?
I have not.
So he came up in the Ashtanga community, but now he's got his own thing. And forgive me if the tagline's wrong, but gentle is the new advanced, I believe, is what he's working with. And so he's got he he had his thing going in New York, and then he moved to Pennsylvania. He got out of the city, and prices went up, whatnot. But he does a lot of online classes now, and he's got a teacher's class, and so like teachers can talk amongst themselves, and it's like a class for teachers. But something he's doing on his podcast that I really respect and admire, he's really, one of the themes of his show is transparency. Mm-hmm. So like as a yoga teacher, he's telling everybody what he makes, because the secrecy kind of makes this weird thing. And then it ends up hurting the students because everybody's just paying too much. And so he's inviting other teachers to be open about what they make and how they make a living, because it's a weird new thing as these ancient practices are being commodified in this new world, and we're trying to make it work and trying to make it help us and also trying to get by. So he's trying to be transparent about that. And coming from the Ashtanga community, with the events that happen around Pattabhi Jois being found out as accosting all these women, he's trying to have a really open dialogue about that. And so he's invited people to talk about that, and he's always commenting about new articles that are coming out, and he's awesome. Yeah, he's trying to have
the fact that you said gentle is the new advanced.
Yeah.
I'm in, because that's the thing with Ashtanga practice in general. It kind of had to me that feel of Bikram, like push more, go more. Everything has to look a certain way.
Yeah.
A lot of cues to me when I practiced Ashtanga a few times. It's like palms have to be together when you're interlacing your fingers behind your back. Like things that to me are not that important were emphasized a lot, and I felt that in Bikram, of course. So I don't teach like that, because I feel like it's not what it looks like, right? It's what's happening inside that's important. And and then we're all going to look a little different, and to be okay with that. So I love that. I'm going to look into him, because
he's great.
To be an Ashtanga practitioner and have gotten to that place, I'm like, okay, he's had a lot of wisdom to share. So
when I first came to his podcast, I didn't gravitate towards it right away, but he continued to have on teachers that I was following. Okay. So I kept tuning in for those conversations, and now I went through the back catalog of episodes and checked them all out. I love it. He had Seth Powell on. I see he's a mutual friend of ours on Facebook, but I don't.
Seth Powell.
He's a yogic scholar. He's got Yogic Studies, an online place for studying yoga. So he's a yogic scholar, and we have mutual friends up in the northern part of California, so it all came around. But anyway, I wanted to ask you about that, but we can keep moving on. So Jay Brown Yoga Talks, he's having all these conversations about the unfolding of what has happened and is an ongoing conversation in the Ashtanga community, which is timely with the Me Too movement and this shifting conversation in a lot of different groups in and out of yoga about the shifting role of the teacher and the student. So without getting too far into religious prophecy, so in Buddhism, they say the next coming of the Buddha is supposed to be the Maitreya Buddha, and Maitreya is a friend. So some Buddhists have interpreted that as the next coming of the Buddha will be the Sangha, the community.
Yes.
And so we will be the ones to deliver in the new age of righteousness
and
to support each other and bring each other up. And that seems to just go really well with the whole falling of the guru thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's funny because for so long in the yoga world, when you would mention, I teach Bikram, you'd get this funny look, and everyone like poo-pooing on Bikram, because he was one of the first ones to fall, right? He was one of the first one to people come,
and he's still in Mexico charging thousands of dollars.
It's ridiculous.
To girls
I'm sorry
who are,
to say.
It's. I just read an article yesterday about it. Yeah, he's still cashing in Mexico right now.
Yeah, and it's a very interesting situation in my life for me, because what that practice represented for me at a particular time in my life, what it allows me to do for people and with people now, having the studio where I can teach with a little more awareness or whatever I want to call it. It's still hard to even say the name and think that I'm promoting that, because honestly, when people come in, they're like, I'm like, well, if you're going to go to some other studio, let me just tell you, make sure not to lock your knee and make sure not to push too much. And I feel like I'm like the contraband lady, like, don't do it too much. Or like, be careful what they're telling you. Don't believe everything they say, So, but at the same time, I can't just say, I can't eliminate it from my repertoire of my life, right? But I definitely do not support the man. I didn't support him when I went to training. I was horrified. I was expecting I was going to have an actual teacher. And honestly, that training, I didn't learn anything.
You were trained directly from Bikram?
and we just were given a script, and you have to repeat the script, and yeah, you can lead a class by just repeating a script, but you don't
You're like,
know
I was already an
anything.
actress.
Yeah, exactly. That was easy for me. I'm like, oh, all I gotta do is repeat these words. Okay, I got it. I'm great. But it really, any question that came up, I'm a question asker. I'm a student, right? So I'm like, wait, I don't understand this. I need to know this. And any question asked be like met with, if it's not in the dialogue, don't worry about it. I'm like, okay, I guess I didn't come here to learn. And it was a big investment.
Yeah.
It was $5,000 back then. Now it's like 15 or something crazy like that. So I personally, when people ask me about training, I don't recommend going to that training. I think there's plenty of other trainings we can learn a lot more. I respect other people's choices and decisions, but I think that really it's a waste of money to go study with somebody that has been proven to be a rapist. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
There's no other word for it. I do believe the 5 women that came forth, and I think there's probably more that didn't come through. Just the way he defends himself, it's like, it's worse than Trump. It's horrible.
I mean, it's apparent with him in particular. But yeah, so I wanted to talk to you about this because you're a woman, you're in the community. And these conversations are coming up for a lot of people for the first time. They're starting to explore the idea that their leaders are not infallible.
Right, that all of them have had some.
Yeah, we're all humans. And so you trained in Bikram, that has had its controversy, and then you trained in Anusara, which also had a similar controversy and falling out.
Yes.
So I guess I feel like you have more experience with dealing with the fallout of this thing, and I guess the first kind of question that comes to mind is, can we separate the teachings from the teacher? And that's a nuanced conversation. It's not always so easy.
Yeah.
Sometimes they have scholarship and they've, got some like proper intellectual things that they've developed. Sometimes they're just being creepers.
Right,
and
right.
It's
and sometimes it's both at the same time, right?
Yeah, it's very nuanced.
I think that what you said about the Sangha and the next embodiment of the Buddha, it's kind of where I'm coming in my own practice and my own teaching, is the understanding that we're all the authority of our own experience, right? That we have to be the ones to stand up and say, okay, this is what feels right for me. This is where I stand. This is what I'm okay with, what I consent to. And I think it's fabulous that this is happening. I think it's great that people's voices are being heard, and that the community has opened up to listen to those voices.
Yes.
Because I think that was the biggest problem, is people would complain and they would just be extricated. They would moved away from the community, not welcomed. And now it's like, oh, actually, no, we need to look at ourselves. We need to look at the bigger picture. And it's wonderful.
It really
I can't
is.
say enough about how great I think it is. I even with John Friend, who is the founder of Anusara, I don't equate him to Bikram in the sense that I do think there's lines.
Mm-hmm.
Raping someone, like forcing yourself sexually on someone, is very different than consensual sex to me. Now, it doesn't take away the fact that he did other things that he wasn't supposed to do, and he did sleep with a married woman and all this. But I'd never heard of him forcing himself on anyone. Now, I know that the teacher-student dynamic creates a very different power situation.
Yes.
But from
psychological
even
manipulation
people,
is a kind of forcing and not
you're
physical.
right. You're right.
But if somebody's
100%.
young
Oh, yeah.
and impressionable, and you tell them all the things that set
and
them
that
off,
you're going to help them. Yeah. And there was a lot of like, oh, I'm going to help you along on this path. And you're going to be, so there is that. You're right.
It's
I always think
coercion.
like, yeah.
It's just not
So
a
maybe
physical
it is,
coercion
Yeah.
in the same sense.
So maybe it is the same thing. I've always put a line there in my mind, but maybe it's time I readdress that line.
My initial
I
reaction.
have no interest in learning from him or ever being in his presence again. There's no way around that. Right away I gave away I didn't have my certification. I was in the process of getting certified, and I had like everything I needed. I was about to take the test, the famous test you had to do, and then it all went down. But I was what they call inspired, and so I gave that up right away. And I do feel like it's time to topple, and it's also political, right? So it's time to topple the 1%. Like anybody that's on top that thinks somehow they have an innate right to be above everybody else. I feel that's oh, it's not that time anymore. We don't need
Yes.
kings and queens,
Yes.
and we don't need.
And that ties into a lot more of what I wanted to
Gurus
talk about.
and-
So I wanted to talk about Puerto Rico and
Yeah.
decolonization. And I think,
Yes.
I'm not sure if we're going to have time to get to all of that, but I think the power structure comes from this patriarchal point of view that's
Oh my
really
gosh, yeah.
top down and
Oh, yeah.
control and power over cooperation or any kind of solidarity amongst the people, any kind of helping. Yeah, and it's definitely high time that these conversations are being had, and hopefully the
Yes.
pendulum can swing in another direction.
Yes, it's been a very interesting time in Puerto Rico.
So interesting.
The-
Yeah, let's go there.
Yeah, sure. I think the interesting thing is that the colonial mentality, when you're brought up in an island like Puerto Rico, it's like 100 by 35 miles here. You're made to feel like somehow the Americans, they did this on purpose, obviously, through education and the way they structure things, but you don't see it. It's under the surface, right? But there's a lot of people in Puerto Rico, I find, that think somehow we're less than and we're less capable than. And I mean, I have to say that was one of the experiences I had when I was 19. And I'll say this was back when I was experimenting with psychedelics and I did mushrooms, and I did see that I did want to act. At that point, I was studying psychology in Boston, but I didn't love it. And I was like, oh, I don't know. And I went on my journey and I had this realization. Oh, wait, the only difference between me and those people in the movies is that that's what they're doing and this is what I'm doing. There's no bigger difference. I'm just a person like they are, and that's it. But I didn't know until that moment that I somehow had an internalized idea that I'm just a Puerto Rican. I'm just from this little island. Like those people, they're Americans. Like, and that revealed that to me. Like, oh my gosh, it's like, and I see it with people here. They're like, I'm just from a small town. I'm like, you're just born somewhere. Like, whether you're from a city or a small town, like, don't think of that as making you any less than or any less capable than. And I see that a lot. And that people have this idea of like where they come from somehow determines their future and their, destiny. Mm-hmm. And I certainly don't prescribe to that.
Good.
Yeah.
But it's definitely, it's a narrative that's pushed on you. I mean, I was just trying
and politically, like, say that.
Yeah, I mean, it's inbuilt. You had 400 years of Spanish colonization to really ingrain it before we took over. And
and it's interesting because the independence movement was rising in Puerto Rico right around the time when the Spanish-American War happened. Mm-hmm. And then they were like, okay, just give them Puerto Rico. Because, of course, like, they were starting to lose power there. There was starting to be uprising and movements, and people, we already had a national identity had developed among Puerto Ricans.
Yep.
And now the fight for that national identity and independence has been long and squelched many times.
Oh, I'm
if
sure.
you read about, there's a book, and there's controversy around this book, but there's a lot of truth in there. It's called War Against All Puerto Ricans. And I don't have the name of the author right now. But one of the things that you learn is how much we were used like guinea pigs. Women in Puerto Rico were like, they would have surgery for something else and they would just take out all their reproductive organs. Just like, there was like involuntary fertilize or
there's a long history of that in this country as well.
Yeah. Especially with black people.
Yes, absolutely.
And there was always this mentality, at least when I was growing up, where you need the United States to be able to what, do you want to be like Cuba? Do you want to be like this? Like there was always this like fear mongering, like if you're independent, you're not going to make it. You can't do it alone. And so that as a person makes you feel like, oh, I can't do it alone. We're not good enough to govern ourselves and to have self-determination.
We're not good enough to govern ourselves. So what I started to say earlier is I listened to this news article and just trying to keep up with contemporary issues there. And at the end of the thing, so Trump had criticized Puerto Rico and Puerto Rico was mad. But in the article they were saying, but they also kind of agreed with him. They don't want to have him call us out, but there was some truth to what he was saying. Yeah. And the question that they ended the piece on was, can they even govern themselves?
Oh, gosh.
they're not even sure if they can do it themselves. They've lost faith in their own system, so they don't even know if they could govern themselves. And come on, like, no, they just don't trust the government, people. I mean,
right.
And they also pointed out,
it's a mafia that's developed there. And let me tell you, it's happening here too.
Oh yeah, I mean, corporate interests, especially. I mean, that's the biggest mafia. But, they pointed out also, maybe you take some solace in the fact that you can elect your governor, but then there's the board of directors that you don't get to vote for, that they're just put in there. And that's put in by the mainland's government. Or like the government of all of us. I said our country to that country earlier.
You're talking about the fiscal control board?
Whatever. Yeah, well, when they were calling for the governor to resign, they also were calling for the board to go away too, right?
Right, the fiscal control board. So because of the debt, which has not even been audited, right? We don't even know what this debt is for, in a way.
But you're in a recession. I understand like a 12-year or so recession. There's been bankruptcy and money issues. What
happened in Puerto Rico is that there were these incentives that were put into place. I'm not sure exactly it was the 50s or 60s. At some point, they were put into place where there were tax incentives for corporations to come and do business in Puerto Rico. And so we had a lot of pharmaceutical companies, things like Monsanto. We were guinea pigs in that way too. Yeah. But a lot of companies came. And of course, that was a boost to the economy of Puerto Rico because you get a lot of work and construction happen. And when I was growing up in the 80s, Puerto Rico was in a boom. Puerto Rico, there were, PSA announcements about don't throw trash on the street. That doesn't exist now. That nobody's investing in that kind of cultural awareness and awakening. And that was happening in the 80s. And in the 90s, the group of people that came into power, it became very much about nepotism and bringing in your friends. And then it's become like a family. It's become like a mafia. And like there's certain names. And I can't know or say that wasn't always the case before. I don't know. But I think there was a time from 54, which I think is when the first governor of Puerto Rico was elected by the Puerto Rican people. I mean, that's the other day. Up until then, it was just somebody put in by the United States. This is your governor. But from then until the 80s, there was a sense of self-determination. Now, what happens in the 90s is they take away those incentives. So now all these corporations all of a sudden have no reason to keep their jobs there and pay Puerto Ricans a living. So all these pharmaceutical companies, all these companies just left. And so that started the downturn. And then on top of it, you had all the corruption, all these people giving contracts to their pals, signing off. Like right now, what's happening is land is being just sold, land that was like reservations. My dad, I can't tell you, he has been to jail for fighting to take the Marina, the Navy out of Vieques Islands. He has gotten beat up in a protest. He's really politically active too, yeah, right? He actually started a political party to
is that still something that's
ago. He's very active. Yeah. He's very active, but he's not a politician. So he's not part of that circle, right? He's an organizer. An organizer. He's an organizer, yeah.
Which is way more important than any politician.
One construction in particular that I can think of is called Paseo Caribe, was built on public land. And so they're taking land that has 500-year-old castles built by the Spaniards or probably by the slaves, but like patrimony, right? Like things that give value to the country, just sold. So we were just being sold right and left to build like $1 million apartments. And now those are like not selling. And so there's a lot of that the good land is being sold. The beaches are being sold and who buys it, right? It's the millionaires and the people and now there are incentives for Americans to come and buy land and buy apartments and stuff and not have to pay taxes in the U.S. It's like a tax haven now. Mm-hmm. So sadly, what you're seeing is that people that are from there, they don't have the same access. Like they don't have the same access. They don't have the same access to jobs or access to money. So people are leaving. People that do have education, people that want an education, everybody leaves. I mean, here I am living in California. I love Puerto Rico. My family's there. I daydream about going back all the time. I have to say, I know as a yoga teacher, the amount of money I can make here and the lifestyle I can live, I don't think I could do that in Puerto Rico. And doesn't mean I'm not going to do it someday. I still think about it, but right now would not be the best time to do it. People are leaving rather than coming back. And that's very sad to me. So yeah, I am active trying to just shed light on the situation, and at least, I don't even know anymore. I used to be pro-independence my whole life. It's like, we should just be independent. At this point, I think either or. If the United States would be willing to make us a state, which I don't think is ever going to happen. Congress doesn't want that. The Senate doesn't want that. We're going to have more representation that a lot of states would have because of our per capita population. So there's a lot of reasons why, and now with the debt and everything going on, like there's a lot of reasons why it's not in the best interest of the United States to annex us right now. And so then it's like, well, this limbo place doesn't work. This colony state, this doesn't work. So for me, it's like either or. And so even though there was a time that I was more pro statehood, I'm like, well, let's just become independent. And if that's the case, I would go back to Puerto Rico. If there was an opportunity to participate in some way there, I would like that. Mm-hmm. I just don't know that the movement is going towards that right now. I don't know. Yeah.
And a lot of that decision doesn't just come from what the Puerto Ricans want. It comes from
exactly
what the mainland decides.
Yeah.
And I know, and just brushing up. So I'm from New York originally, and I had a first grade class with a kid from my mom's childhood friend's kid. And so she bumped into them, and we reunited, and they're a Puerto Rican family. And so I moved out to California with a Puerto Rican family. So I've felt like I've had this connection to Puerto Rico and Puerto Ricans. But I don't know anything about Puerto Rico. I don't know anything about Puerto Rico's history. I realized very quickly in doing a very little bit of research that I didn't learn shit in school when it came to Puerto Rico. And, like, oh my God, like, wow, the whole indigenous population before the Spanish arrived, like 3,000 years ago, they had their own thing going on. And then how the culture, you said during Spanish colonization, they had already formed their own sense of identity that was mixed between the indigenous peoples and the slaves and the colonizers, settlers, kind of formed into its own thing that is now kind of taken on its own new interesting life in this new post-colonial period. It's really interesting. But I'm glad that we as mainlanders are starting to talk more about Puerto Rico. Unfortunately, it was first because of the hurricane.
Right.
And but now we've had the recent event with the governors.
Yeah, no, I think it's wonderful. I think it's great that there is more interested, like people are more interested in finding out, like, oh yeah, Puerto Rico, what's this? I don't think most people even know we're a part of the United States, right? I've been asked so many times, like, are you a citizen? And I'm like, oh yeah, we're all born citizens. And
when you start to Google questions, that's one of the big ones that keeps coming up. People
Sadly,
are curious about that. We just don't know about it. So how
Yeah.
can we support you if we don't even know what your plight is? So that's part of my hope in having this conversation. That maybe some people will have a little bit more of an inkling of what the hell's going on down there. Like, I mean, anybody on the planet deserves humanity and compassion and help, and it's the duty of the strong to help those who are weak, especially those that you have systematically weakened yourself. You should go back and help them when you have a change of heart.
Well, I don't even think that the United States has to help Puerto Rico. I will tell you this. I know
even if it means hands off, if that's the help you need.
Exactly. That's the thing. That's the thing. And
whatever you're gonna do, do it.
And I'm gonna be a little bit. I'm not usually a nationalist. When I moved to the States, I didn't want to live with all the Puerto Ricans. Like, I wanted to live with people from all over the world. But as time goes by and I live away from my island, I see there's a very strong spirit in the people of Puerto Rico. There's a sense of identity, and culturally, we definitely have an identity. We definitely have a cultural personality, if you will. And I feel like I want to celebrate that. And I do think that we are capable of governing ourselves. And there are a lot of very capable, incredibly talented, politically, artistically, creatively, in so many ways, people that I know that are Puerto Rican. And I think that given the opportunity, Puerto Ricans can have their own country. Now, the thing is, we have to understand the reality of the world we live in. It's taken all this time for Latin American countries to even have a little bit of independence. And even now we see the whole situation with Venezuela. It's like, I'm not going to defend Maduro and whatever he's doing, but are we meddling into another country when we're like creating,
Constantly
trying to
meddling.
measure the price of oil and all the things to like strangle their economy? Like, just like Cuba, people talk about Cuba, but it's like, I don't think they would be so bad off if they didn't have the embargo and didn't have all the other things to deal with. Like, there's reasons behind Latin America being kept down, and that's obviously it's the United States doing. And so I have a hard time deciding, like, what would be best for the United States to meddle and try to help? Because sometimes when you trying to help, it's the worst.
Throwing
so, like,
toilet paper at you. Like,
giving independence and allowing, right? Because is it going to be a true independence, or are we still, well, you can't do trade with China, and you can't do trade with Russia, and you can't do trade, like,
limited independence.
Exactly. A limited independence that we are. After all, we are a small island.
Wouldn't you also need some kind of initial monetary boost? Like a parting gift or something?
I think that if the audit happens, if they were willing to audit the debt, a lot of that debt would be forgiven. A lot of that debt, not just forgiven, it would be proven to not be, viable.
Legitimate, yeah.
Legitimate. And then, I think that it should have happened after Maria, that some of the debt was forgiven. The people that are really making money out of this are investors and people that have a lot of money already. Yeah, there's like a 4%.
Disaster capitalism.
Yeah.
You familiar with this
yeah,
concept?
Yeah, exactly. I actually saw a video of this lady that works for, I'm not sure if she worked for Home Depot, but she was talking about like, this is the time to invest in Home Depot. We're just waiting for the next disaster.
Oh my God.
They know. Yeah. So it's a complicated world.
It is very complicated. Yeah. Wow.
But I get down sometimes when I think about the big and the complexity of it all. But then I always remember, okay, the history of the world, there's never been a time that the powers that be have made it easy for everybody to have a good life. It's just the history of humanity.
Yeah.
And people persevere, and people are resilient, and people still create change. And we see things like the French Revolution and so many other ones before, that it can happen. And that the fact that we took that governor down, Ricky Rosselló, was huge. It doesn't mean the person that's now Wanda Vasquez, it doesn't mean that she's a wonderful person and she doesn't have her own issues. I just think the mere fact that 1.2 million people showed up to a march in an island of 3.5 or 4 million people
Wow.
is incredible. And
Solidarity.
I do think that is creating an example in other countries. Like I just
You
heard
have Hong
this
Kong
woman-
right now is
yes,
doing it
Hong
up.
Kong,
Hong Kong's doing it.
Brazil.
I mean, and a couple years ago,
Brazil
like
against Bolsonaro.
South Korea got their president out. Brazil's doing this.
Yes.
So hopefully,
So I think the power is in the people, and I think the power is in keeping ourselves healthy, happy, joyful, connected. The internet is an ally because we get to, hopefully it'll stay free and open.
Yeah.
But it has given us a reach that we didn't have, because the media is corporate media now. It is like, I know people, Trump says it's all like fake news. Actually, I believe most of it is. Like, not that all of it is fake news, but there is a big influence of corporate money in our media. There's no way around it.
Yeah.
And there are certain topics that are just off limit, and there's certain ways to talk about things that are acceptable and unacceptable. Israel, for example, is one of those things. Like, you got to be very careful how you walk that path, right? So I
BDS.
yeah.
That's how I walk that path.
good for you.
Boycott, divest, sanction. Yeah.
And that's the thing. It's every one of us in our own way, supporting each other, being there for each other, empowering each other, empowering ourselves, being the authority of our own experience. I think that's a good thing.
I do too. Yeah,
The way forward.
I'm inspired by what Puerto Rico's been doing, and I hope that it continues to inspire people and rub off here. I mean, I feel like we've gone in such a dark direction politically and globally. We do see a tendency of a pendulum swinging.
Yeah,
And so I'm hoping it'll swing far enough in the other direction this next time around. I don't want to get back to the prophecy thing, but I have a real good feeling about 2020.
Me too.
I don't
It's
know
not a big
about
surprise to you,
elections,
but I want to say, like, oh my gosh, we better get Bernie in there.
Did you go see him when he was in LA?
I wasn't able to, but I'm definitely going to go next time he comes. That was one of the most amazing experiences I've ever had, was going to the first political rally I ever went to in 2015. And My husband didn't want to go.
I've
Nobody
only been
wanted
to
go.
protests. I don't think I've ever been to a rally.
I was like, oh, I want to hear this guy talk.
Yeah.
And I never was motivated to go to any political rally. And I was like, okay, I want to go. I'm going to make it. And I went all the way to LA on my own. And I had never felt more like safer in a 40, I don't know how many thousands of people were there. Maybe it was like 30,000 people. It was they had to take a bigger venue. They literally had to move the venue because too many people had responded. And people were courteous. I walked in there. It was like a huge family. People were excited. And these are people that care about others. These are people that understand that we need to support our weakest ones, that we need to have a net as a society if we want everybody to rise. And we're going in a direction where the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. And I know he talks about that all the time. He's been talking about it for 40 years or whatever.
It's the conversation to have. And it's the truth. I mean, and the reality of it is it's coming to a critical mass now. Exactly. So, I mean, we're in late stage
middle class
capitalism.
Is disappearing. And people, the amount of homeless in LA, it's unacceptable, really. It's unacceptable. When I drive by and I see the tent cities, I'm just like, wow, that used to be one little area in downtown LA where you could find that. Every other bridge I go by has tents. Every other park. I lived by Echo Park before. Now there's tents all over Echo Park. And something has to change. We can't keep going this direction. Yeah. The markets, I don't know what has to happen, but I definitely feel that Bernie's ideas. And yeah, I like Elizabeth Warren and I like other ones, but they're all taking Bernie's ideas. So why not have the original if he's available?
Yeah.
Let's see what happens. But
one of the points that comes up, was that Bernie's ideas were crazy 4 years ago and now everybody's taking them, right? So I think, maybe like Yang's ideas of universal basic income, people are on the fence about it now, but in a couple years it's going to be like, oh, all the robots took our jobs. We definitely want that. And then Marianne Williamson, bringing love into the equation.
I love
a peace department. Yeah. She's on the fringe of that group, but she's introducing these ideas. And I was surprised to see so many people in my social networks responding to that so favorably. It made me do a double take and look into her a little bit more. Like, well, if these people that I respect are turning towards her, what is she about?
Funny, we have different friends because I saw a lot of like people making fun of her.
Oh no, I had that too. I was
like, wait, you're not seeing the big picture of what she's talking about. Yeah. She's actually looking at the root cause of all these situations. Like she's saying the bigger picture. She's not just.
And she's talking about healing too. Yeah. So like, I think it's really important in order to go forward to clean up what's behind you, right?
Yeah, totally.
So,
totally.
like she's having a conversation about reparations.
Yes,
and
huge.
I haven't heard her talk too much about Native American and indigenous peoples, but I think I saw, she took a picture with them like everybody else does. But I mean, turning back at the genocide and the slavery that occurred here and is continuing to occur is part and parcel with moving forward in a healthy direction. And if we don't do that, we're just shooting ourselves in the foot and going to be continuing to dig our own graves.
100%.
That's what I think.
I really like Tulsi Gabbard too, in the sense that she has experience with war, and the way she talks about peace comes from a place of experience. Mm-hmm. And I don't think she's a viable candidate for this time, but I definitely have my eye on her for the next election because she's young, she's a woman of color, she's smart, and the way she talks, I can't be a politician because I get emotional. I'll be a puddle in the middle of the conversation. But she manages to get her point across directly and clearly. And I think peace is the direction we need to move in. I think that these endless wars, are a big part of why our country is suffering. Because when you look at the GDP or whatever the GDP, the amount of money we spend on what every year, it's ridiculous. And people are like, oh, there's no money for education. There's no money for healthcare. It's like, just take a little percentage of all that money goes to war games. Yeah. War games. We explode bombs worth of millions of dollars just as a practice. Like there's practices going on right now just to practice, and they're spending thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. Like, that could be helping somebody that's homeless. That could be helping somebody that needs education. Like, to me, that is one of the biggest issues aside from global warming, right?
I completely agree. And I think it is the global warming issue because endless wars are for the sake of endless profit
and oil production
and endless profit and economics are completely abstract from the human condition.
Yeah.
Like, there's no connection whatsoever
Right.
for us to base our entire network of livelihood on a system of economics that completely neglects our basic human needs and in fact exploits them. And it's a mess. And I'm glad that some of these conversations are starting to be had. For so long, I thought I was crazy. Like, I heard somebody talking about how perpetual cynicism kind of ends up leading to apathy when you feel helpless. And that's where I was for a really long time, until I started to incorporate self-love and start to become more solution-oriented and stop just... But I mean, I still feel like I'm a cynical idealist. So I'm shooting for the best, and I really want it to happen, but I wouldn't be surprised. You know?
Okay, I can see that.
But I'm definitely an idealist, and I do have hope for this next generation, because they're coming into it with all of the shit is exploding at their table, whether it's guns in schools and the kids are doing amazing things out there, whether it's plastic and every ounce of ice in the Arctic, like it's over the top, and it's undeniable in such a way that people are actually starting to take action.
And you know what? They weren't fed the American dream story because it was evident to them that wasn't the case anymore, right?
Start.
Like our generation and the generation of our parents.
We still had our fingers crossed.
There was the whole American dream. And there was a time in America that was happening, that people could move up and, people could pull themselves by the bootstraps kind of thing, which is such a bad analogy because nobody can actually do that.
Some people don't have bootstraps.
But there was a time when you could there was upward mobility. You could actually study and give yourself a good job and raise your family and have a nice home. Now, and the kids coming up now, the 20-year-olds now that I have coming from college to take class, they didn't grow up with that. They didn't believe that because they've seen that that's not the case for them. They've seen that, and I'm in Claremont. I have kids that are pretty privileged. And even them, they see not everybody can make it all the time. And we grew up thinking, if you work hard enough, you can make it. Anybody can make it. And actually, no, that's not the case. Not everybody has the same opportunities in this country. Not everybody has the same treatment from the police or whatever. Like, there are things that need to be addressed, and that was all covered up. And at least when I know you're a little bit younger than me, but in the 80s and 90s, we believed that wasn't the case. We believed racism was over. Oh, kumbaya, everybody's living together. The United Colors of Benetton,
While they're playing cops on TV and just creating fear.
Right.
Yeah.
And we didn't have cell phones with cameras that were showing us the cop beating the lady or firing and shooting
and
the
they
black
made a point that we didn't see it
away.
after Vietnam, right? They made it illegal to show caskets with the flag, so we don't see them now. And
so
what they report
has
on.
been huge. I think the internet really has been a big opener. When I first Facebook, people are like, oh, I hate Facebook.
It's up and down.
I'm like, I live in Puerto Rico. I mean, I live in California. My family's in Puerto Rico. My other family's in Texas and all over the country. I would be and I was for many years when I didn't have something like Facebook or Snapchat, or not even Snapchat. I use WhatsApp a lot. I didn't have that connection. I wouldn't talk to my cousins for 5 years. Like, I would see them like, oh, how you doing? And the fact that I can actually know, like, my cousin just started her new class, yesterday, and she's doing well. That's huge to me. The fact that the net can stay connected, that we know what our friends are doing. We know what people are doing. I think that's huge. It gives me hope. I think if we didn't have that, I'd be much more cynical. But the fact that there is a way for people to connect and reach out and get together and organize, huge. So that's why we have to protect that.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
I also think it's tricky because it's a neutral principle, right? It's the internet. It's connectivity at all levels. You happen to be a proactive person who's looking for those positive outlooks and looking to build connection versus separation, but not everybody has that much willpower, right? That's why you have that Cambridge Analytica, right? Their whole model was to find those who were impressionable and push them in the direction that they wanted, which was towards Trump and towards Brexit. So the internet is, it can go either way. So we have to continue trying to promote positive means, I think.
Right. And definitely, I mean, I do think like we all spend way too much time on social media, more than I should. But it's it's a price I'm willing to pay to feel connected.
It's amazing to see, you know, like the movements that can arise through social media, and unfortunately, you know, sometimes countries will put the squash on it because people are using it to revolt and whatnot. So the collective power that it does for us in giving us that network is powerful, and hopefully,
Sangha.
yeah, it's the Sangha, it's the community, it's, you know, like spiritual warriors, and I really hope that we can rise up and do something about it, because. So I wanted to bring up the topic of decolonization, because post-colonial attitude, because you're from Puerto Rico, so I think you have a unique view on what it means to be colonized, but also there's an ongoing conversation in the yoga community about decolonizing yoga and using it appropriately and honoring the traditions that it came from. And, you know, you have the Mick mindfulness thing where we're taking mindfulness away from like all of the network that it was built into to have the support system, and not giving people the warning that it's not always positive. You get quiet, the dark stuff comes up. You know, people are freaking out. They're not taking, you know, if you haven't handled your mental health, like, and you do too much meditation, it's intense. And anyway, so I think in looking to the future and how we can better ourselves as a population that has inherited the past, I'm seeing many people turn towards more natural means. I mean, like, I haven't heard much about it lately, but for like a good decade, you had like the homesteaders. People were heading back to like buying their own land and farming and learning to live off the land again.
Right.
And I think, you know, it's a tricky conversation, but I think turning towards indigenous ways and means, not necessarily adopting anybody's culture or anything, but like turning towards more natural ways of being in harmony with the earth that have been given to us as an example by numerous populations that ultimately were squashed. But the example is there of how to live with the earth.
Oh yeah. I think it's not for lack of knowledge. It's a very willful neglect, I think, because it doesn't make money necessarily to live. I mean, maybe now because you can market yourself as like how to live in the land or whatever. But I feel like with industrialization created this mentality of like, okay, the more we can make machines and make machines do things, and like our lives will be more comfortable. Like the 50s, everybody has a microwave, everybody has a car. And I think that we inevitably pulled away from living in nature. But like you say about the pendulum, I do see that coming back. And I do think that it's a natural desire of humans to like have some ground, right? You see these pictures of, we've been looking at repainting our house, and you see these pictures of like redone backyards and it's all cement. I'm like, oh my gosh, like how do people live like this? I need a little bit of ground and a little bit of like dirt. So I think human instinct will kick in at some point, and it's happening.
I think that's happening now because we've put ourselves on this hamster wheel of live to earn to live, live to earn to live. And we're not living. Like if you call that living, right? Like back to the earth. And that's why, you know, you see things happening. Doctors are prescribing forest time, things like this, back to nature. And many people know that that's healing. Yeah. But, it's not for a lack of knowledge. It's too much knowledge. We've been like overstimulated with too many new ways of being well. And so that's why, you know, natural medicine is called alternative medicine. Right. And like, chanting mantras is called new age music. So you know, these are the old ways of doing it. And all this modern medicine and these modern practices are the new things. Right. Goodness gracious.
And that was also, you know, kind of by design.
Absolutely.
They were like mentioned, you're a quack if you practice acupuncture or whatever. So that is beautiful to see that's coming back. Even doctors nowadays are saying, go do some yoga, go, you know, sit in the ocean for a bit and
it's slowly seeping in because they can't deny it, but I
think honestly, I think a lot of doctors themselves, their interest is to help people, right? I do believe that. I think that it's the industry they're a part of. Yes. And the perks and the information that
who's training them.
Exactly. Who's training them. And it's like the whole thing about learning and unlearning, right? Like once you learn something, it's very hard to unlearn it. But, experience itself is the best teacher. And I think they are coming to that realization. I'm like, oh yeah, just putting someone in an empty clinical looking room is not going to help them have like a healing experience. So hospitals are now including plants and views and things like that. So I do think that in general, we have amazing humans that are doctors and humans.
Yes.
And the system behind that, which includes the pharmaceuticals and the insurance companies, right? That's why Medicare for all, like, let's get that middleman out of the way, because they're only there to make money. And how do you make money? When people are sick.
Exploitation.
So, exactly.
It's so ridiculous. Profit margins, and it's insane.
It's insane.
It's insane.
Yeah. When you have a yacht for your yacht, you have too much money. Sorry.
Yeah. No, thank you. No, thank you. All right. So the future is looking good. That's what we're saying. We're coming out of this dark period.
Don't give up hope. Stay active. Stay present.
Yeah. So people always talk about it being the Kali Yuga, the dark ages, but like Swami Sri Yukteswar, Paramahansa Yogananda's teacher, he's like, no, we're coming up on the golden age. Like we're in the Dwapara Yuga. Like we're moving towards something better, actually.
Like they used to say,
the
dawning of the age of Aquarius.
Yeah, it's happening. It's shifting, and
philosophy. Yeah,
it's shifting. Big things are popping.
I feel it. I feel like what you said before about the Sangha stayed with me, because each one of us makes a difference. Each one of us is important. Don't think that what your little contribution is not enough. The way you interact with people, the way you are at your job, just how you drive, being courteous, being aware, not just like, go on me first. That alone can make a huge difference. And I see that happening more and more. So I feel like each one of us has a role to play. Mm-hmm. We're not invisible beings. I mean, you can be, but every single voice counts.
Yeah. It reminds me of the thing I said earlier about the flow state.
Yeah.
And making my life a flow state. And so I don't want to get too far into it, but in working with the role that my intention and imagination plays in my life, it's starting to blur the line between the inside and the outside. We can use cheesy new age jargon to say we're all one, or you are me, and things like this on some levels, but on a deeper level it starts to become apparent that it's not such a platitude.
No.
And that it is actually what's happening, and the kinder I am to you, the kinder I feel towards myself, and the ripple effect of spreading love instead of leaning into the fear and anger and inclusivity
and all that we're talking about. I really feel like in that sense, that's the major difference with the people that we see that we're like, are they psychopaths? Like, why don't they care about the poor? Why don't they care about other people and only care about their healthcare and I think it's the difference between understanding that you are a part of everyone, that everyone is connected to you, and not. If you think it's just you and you're an individual and you're separate from everything else, then it makes sense that they behave that way. But selfishness becomes not as practical when you know that hurting that person is somehow going to affect you in some way, and that helping other people is going to come back to you. I don't believe in karma in the way that, every act is going to have a response. I feel like, there's a cause and effect, and there's a response. And what you put out there is what you're reflected back. And so I definitely feel like that's one of the major things that is going to shift the consciousness of the planet, is when more and more people awaken to the reality that we are all one, that it is all part of one system, that we're not just a whole bunch of different countries. That's why it's so hard for me to talk about the independence of Puerto Rico, because I would like to see a global country. Like, I don't want people to go globalism. I'm like, well, you know what? I would like to see all countries disappear and just humans.
It's one planet.
It's just.
I mean, we only have one planet.
That's very idealistic and whatever, but I do.
When the aliens show up, then we might get some solidarity.
Exactly.
Like, oh, it's us against them. Got it. Okay.
Exactly.
I mean, we just the us versus them mentality is so ingrained. Yeah. I think we might have to have some bigger other to gain the solidarity. I mean, it seems like we have the climate change as an issue that should bring us together, though.
It should. But education, people are not really well educated, and there was so much miseducation for so long.
Well, I mean, okay, so I got into Naomi Klein a little bit. I don't know if you know her.
Yeah.
That's Buddhist social ethics class. And she talks about how in the 90s, we thought that climate change was going to be the thing that brought us together. And the same time we had the climate change talks, we had the World Trade talks.
Yeah.
And every time something big came up, trade trumped climate.
Yeah.
And it kept, yeah. So it's the trade and the economic thing that stifled the movement in the 90s and 2000s. And so now we're here with like, oh, everything's melting faster than we thought it was. We better act now, act now, act now.
But it all comes to, the economic interest of a few is trumping the well-being of the whole planet.
We just forgot how good the rich taste. That's all it is. They're just delicious.
Oh my gosh.
All right, so we've been going for a little while, so maybe we'll just power through a little bit more here. So maybe we'll lighten it up a little bit. I want to talk a little bit about art and creative expression. So you express yourself creatively, I'm sure, in a myriad of ways, one of which is you like to make jewelry.
I do.
And you have an Etsy shop where you sell some of it.
I haven't been selling on Etsy as much.
Okay.
I have an Instagram page, and I have been really bad about putting stuff up, I have to admit. But I love making it. I love doing it, and I bring it to my students, and I share it when I can. But yeah, if you want to follow my Instagram, it's Monica Muñiz Jewelry.
Nice.
And that's my handle. I'm not a great business person.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's art. You have your other means of making money. It's not your breadwinner. So you have that liberty to.
There was a time that I was working on my website, and then I ended up not being able to do it, like postponing it, and then I didn't end up making jewelry for almost a year. So my New Year's resolution that year was to forget the website and just make jewelry for the love of it. Mm-hmm. And it's just like how I kind of go into my own flow state, right? Like when I'm looking at the stones, I feel connected to the earth and the metals, and playing with that. To me, it's very cathartic and yeah, it's creative. It's a creative outlet. So I love it.
Do you have other outlets for creativity, artistic expression?
I love to dance.
Yeah.
I'm a dancer. I wish I could sing, not there, but but I sing along when I dance, and I love to move my body. Other than that, I'm not a great drawer or painter. Oh my gosh, my brothers both got that talent. I can't even write nicely. I have no mind hand coordination. But I like any creative, like manual dexterity thing as opposed to like drawing or something like that.
Yeah.
It's fun for me. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, in listening to myself and what's coming up, I realize I've got a deep need to have a creative outlet. I started noticing, like, if I get a little assignment to make a little sign, or one of the kids wants me to help with their projects. I got nephews at home and a niece. Last year I worked in a 5th grade classroom for the whole semester. I haven't talked to you about that. I was a teacher's aide in LAUSD, so I got to go out to the protests with the teachers and march in solidarity with the teachers.
Awesome.
I had an amazing year doing that. But I get all into the kids projects because I'm like, because I in the past haven't been giving myself my own artistic outlet. And I like to do some writing, and I express myself creatively in writing, and sometimes I use fancy handwriting, but to like make art, like I'm not a good drawer either. Once upon a time, when I was grounded a lot as a kid, I practiced and I actually got better. So like we talked about, it's something you can improve.
Right.
But my natural tendency is to want to like make clip art. So I took this art class with this amazing teacher last semester, and we had to make an art book. And so I started, cut out other pictures, and I made my own art, and then I made a poem for each one that went with it.
Wow.
And it goes with this flow state thing. It's like the listening. And so it was a 1-unit class. So it was a very minimal amount of effort. She's like, okay, just finish this many pages by the end of the semester, but it's just one per week. So I didn't have like a timeline for it. I just had to get them all done. So I could, whenever I spontaneously felt some energy, it's like, I'm going to be creative right now. Or if I'm like thumbing through a magazine, like, that, like something's coming to me, I want to cut that out. And
I love that.
Opening up that floodgate or that little gate, that outlet, letting that energy flow, so to speak, of creativity bled into my openness and how I moved about in other places in my life. So I learned from that I was definitely underestimating giving myself the outlets that I need. So we all have a lot of different things we need to do to express ourselves, whether it's communication or exercise or different things to have our physical and emotional needs met. And a creative outlet is something that I think I thought that artist was a dirty word for so long.
Oh, interesting. Interesting.
Like I
How
thought
come?
that maybe people who want to be artists aren't taking life seriously enough. For so long, growing up in LA, I met so many actors. Like I was just like, they're all just narcissists. And then like one of my friends, she does theater and all this amazing local art. And she said, you know what? I can explore facets of my own personality through my roles that I could never do in any other way, or I haven't been able to.
Huge.
And for me, at that point, something shifted, and I was like, oh, like it's there's something else to this. It's not just about getting attention.
Oh my gosh, no, it's the human experience. For me, acting was like embodying the
absolutely.
variety
It's a
of human
microcosm
experience.
of the macrocosm. Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a fun part of it for me. Yeah. The
Nice.
auditioning, not so fun.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's industry, right? Like I enjoyed making those pieces of art, but if my life depended on selling them, it wouldn't be so much fun anymore. That's why this podcast is a labor of love. This is being brought to you commercial free.
Yes.
For the time being.
Just for the love of it. Just because we love to talk to each other. It's so nice to spend some time with you.
I know. It's so great. That's one of the other cool things that's been happening for me with this podcast, getting to reach out to all my friends who are movers and shakers and doing cool things. I realized that the last 3 years I've been in school, I've kind of been neglecting my social community and only touch base with like some people sometimes. Like we saw each other a year or two ago. I was here.
Right.
So much has happened. So I'm thoroughly enjoying reconnecting with people and connecting with you in this moment.
That is beautiful.
Cool. All right. So you got your jewelry. You gave people your Instagram. We'll have links to all that stuff at the bottom of the page. Also, you have a retreat coming up, a yoga retreat. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Well, it's the first yoga retreat I've ever done. My friend Setare Derakshan, she's a neurologist chiropractor, and she does a lot of work with emotional release therapy and hypnotherapy. So she wanted to do something that included yoga, and we're close friends. We're like, okay, let's do it. So we're going to be doing a retreat in Spain, in Granada. We're going to be there June 6th through June 12th of 2020. And I don't have I guess if you follow me on my Instagram, I'll post about it there. So my Instagram handle is Monica I Muñiz. I think that's my Instagram.
All right, we'll get the links. People can check the show notes.
But I am excited about that because at first she's amazing. My friend is like just brilliant and inspiring, and she, we like each other because we're both kind of like mirrors of each other. And she's like, oh my gosh, we got to just like help people like find their joy and live how we live. And I was like, no, we can't tell anybody how to live. Like I'm just figuring out how to live myself. Like I'm not a authority on anybody else's experience. So we both came to the realization that we just need to make it a wonderful week. We're going to do some yoga, some meditation, have some breath work. They'll have individual sessions with her to do the hypnotherapy and the emotional release work, and then go explore Granada and go see the Albaicin and go see the Alhambra. And
I've always wanted to go to the Alhambra. I went to Alhambra High School. I've always wanted to go there.
We're going to go see some flamenco dance
Nice.
and just explore another country. I'm very excited about that.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
I'm really happy for you. So I know since I've known you, our mutual yoga friends have been trying to encourage you to do this retreat thing because we all see you as fulfilling this role. Yeah, we loved having you as a yoga teacher.
Oh, thank you. I have to say that for so long, I've stayed in that idea that, I'm not trying to be the Instagram yoga person. I'm not trying to expand my reach. I'm not somebody that's traveling the world doing trainings. And there was a time in the past that I felt bad about that. I was like, oh, I should be doing this. I should be doing that. And I just love the one-on-one connection with people. And the small studio where people come day in, day out. I get to see them. I get to know them. I love that so much. I feel like I gravitated towards that for a long time. And I'm like, okay, maybe I need to just open myself up to it, even if I'm not forcing or trying to make. But I've been feeling lately that maybe there's another step there. Mm-hmm. So I opened a Monica Muñiz Yoga Instagram account. It has one picture on it. I'm not sure when I'm going to put something in there, but I'm like, okay, even if I'm just sharing about like how to circle your wrist, because I do think the Instagram is saturated with yoga people doing fancy poses, and it's beautiful. I love it. I enjoy watching it. I enjoy learning from people there. I follow several beautiful, strong, super informative teachers, but at the same time, I don't see a lot for like the everyday folk, you know. I don't see a lot of that. So that's my direction that I'm going to take it on. So
I like that.
So like my mom, I mean, not because my mom is older, but like I'm just saying anybody can do it, right?
Awesome. I love it. I'll be subscribing.
Oh, awesome.
Cool. So I'd like to wind down now. Can I
Sure.
ask you some questions not necessarily related to your qualifications, quote unquote?
Yeah, sure.
So I've been kind of playing, like I mentioned, with intuition and intention and imagination and creativity and how that plays out into the real world. And we can get into that a little bit more maybe when we're done recording. But I'm just wondering if how does intuition show up in your life? How do you know when to listen to an urge?
Good question.
You know, because sometimes I feel like, is it my gut flora just telling me I want ice cream, or should I really just get up and go for a walk? Right? Like, where are these urges coming from?
Right.
You know, and I think you and I both maybe share some sense of like the God is all things, some panentheism, like everything outside is also inside, and so this idea of intuition for me, it's not coming from an outside source, right? Some people say, oh, it's the voice of God or something. And yeah, maybe it is, but it doesn't mean that it's not also my internal voice.
Right.
And so I'm learning to listen more. And as I learn to listen, I have had a severe increase in synchronicities.
That's what I was going to say.
And
synchronicity is a big one for me.
Predicting the future in extremely specific ways.
Oh, wow. That, I don't know.
Now I'm starting to, through this other podcast, he's really going over imaginal techniques and how you can influence the future by imagining the scene or imagining the scene to have reached completion. And weird stuff is happening, as it has been said. So,
wow.
I'm always curious to hear about how other people are leaning into or working with intuition and intention, creativity. If you have anything.
Synchronicity is a big one for me when I find that things are, you know, oh, I was just thinking of this and then I saw this. Okay, it makes me look a little bit deeper. Or if somebody mentions a book or something and I look at it, I'm like, oh, I was just thinking about that. Like, I feel like where I am, things show up when I need them, right? So that to me is intuition. We're being open to whatever others, or I see something on the internet even, like I just pick up on where I've been, what I have been thinking or feeling. And if it lines up with something that shows up, then that tells me look deeper into that. For the most part, I tend to leave myself alone a lot, like with meditation or breath work, or I'm more of a listener rather. I have a friend, I love her so much, Hagar. She's a manifester, right? She's like, I want this, I'm going to make it happen. And I've never been like that. Like, I wish I was in some ways, but at the same time, like, yeah, we talked before about contentment, and I'm so lucky that I've always had a little bit of an underlying current of contentment in my life. I don't have a huge, motor behind me, like desiring and wanting more. Like, that's why it's so easy for me to be like, oh, I'm okay where I am, you know, so there's the good side of that, and then the side of it, like, well, there's more. You can do more if you want. So I have to work hard to create intention in my life. And for a good 5-6 years, my intention has been to be of service. And I just go back to that. I'm like, is this an opportunity to be of service? And opportunities arise. Just when you put yourself out, you're like, okay, universe, I'm willing to be of service. And like we talked before, I wasn't sure what that meant. Even when that arose in me and I felt that, because, I mean, we didn't talk about this, but I went through 10 years of trying to get pregnant and not getting pregnant and infertility and all these things that I thought my life was going to be a certain way, and then it didn't turn out that way. And I came to that understanding that really I just want to be of service. And even like, to what? Well, to the love, to the light, to the people around me, to whoever shows up in front of me. And that's what to me guides me, is in this moment, hey, I have an opportunity to be of service. Somebody needs something, I'm going to rise up and do that. And that to me is my guide.
Lovely. Yeah. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Love
Thank
that.
you.
All right. I want to ask you one more question and then we'll get out of here. What is the most beautiful thing you've ever seen?
Oh my gosh.
Or beautiful experience you've ever had, or place, or
That's a big question, Anthony.
one of the most beautiful, or a life-changing event?
Well, you know what? I'm going to go back to when
brought
I
on by
was
beauty.
6 years old.
Sure. That's a great time. That's my favorite age. I've got a niece right now who's 6, and let me just say,
gosh.
I think that's my favorite age for a kid. They get an attitude at 7 that is a little more independent.
Right.
A little 5, they're a little goofy, but she's smart and still innocent. 6 is awesome. So what was your moment at 6?
I will say I've seen so many amazing things and beautiful things in my whole life. I can't put into words, but when I was 6, I think I knew somebody that died for the first time. I had this, it was like a friend of the family, and I got to see him in the casket. And that was a big impact to me, to see somebody that I knew that a week before I'd seen walking around and talking, and then he was dead. And that, I guess, made an impression on me. And maybe several months later or something, I had this dream where I was in space, but there was no stars, there was no planets, there was no anything. And all I felt was this expansive, spiraling energy of joy inside myself, of wow, bliss, what people call bliss. I was so happy and content and full.
That's where the contentment comes.
Totally. I was just like, oh my gosh. And I remember the moment in my dream where I realized, wait, there's no stars. Wait, there's no planet. Wait, where am I? I'm on my bed. I have to get back to my bed. And I came to my bed and I woke up. And in that moment of waking up, I had the knowing that that's what happens when you die.
Wow.
And when I knew that, it gave me freedom. I was like, oh, I don't have to be afraid of this thing called death. It's going to be amazing. I'm here to live. I don't have to worry about it. I have to think about it. When it happens, it's going to happen. But can I wanted to come back. I also wanted to come back. I wanted to live my life. So there was a sense of ownership of my life. Oh yeah, wait, I want to be here. So that has always stayed with me.
That's amazing. That is really an unexpected answer. I was expecting some kind of a view or something, but a beautiful understanding of death. Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Oh,
that's
welcome.
amazing.
Thank you. Thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah, this has been awesome.
It was totally unexpected when you wrote to me about interviewing me, and I've never been interviewed by anyone about my life. I was a little nervous, but I was like, I love Anthony. I love talking to him. Let's just talk.
Yeah.
So thank you for making it so comfortable and fun.
Absolutely. It's been my pleasure. All right, Monica. Bye-bye.
Namaste.
All right, how much fun was that? Wow, I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. You can find Monica on Instagram at Monica Muñiz Yoga, or if you're in the Los Angeles area, out in the San Gabriel Valley, you can drop in for a class at the Yoga Cove in Monrovia or Hot Yoga Claremont. I'd love to get any feedback in the form of a review, a comment, or an email at aflairforthecurious@gmail.com. I thought we covered a lot of ground and that there were so many good gems in there. We didn't get into yoga in the era of Me Too or decolonizing yoga as much as I had hoped, but if these topics interest you, I definitely encourage you to look into them. There's so much exciting, progressive work going on right now. I also want to say thanks again to Mike for the sweet tunes and for that delicious dinner that we had after recording the episode. You guys are one of my favorite couples. And as always, I invite you to please give us a 5-star rating on whatever platform you listen to podcasts on. It only takes a few seconds and would really help us out. If you've got an extra minute, you can also write a written review. As a reminder, this episode was brought to you commercial free, but I am a full-time student who works a part-time job and produces this show with my spare time and money, which is minimal. So if you'd like to support the show, you can make a contribution at aflairforthecurious.com through PayPal, Venmo, Cash App, Patreon, or Zelle. All donations will go directly to the cost of maintaining and improving this podcast. Be sure to subscribe because we've got a lot of exciting guests coming up. On the next episode, we talk to actor, writer, and filmmaker Mike Baez about making his first feature-length film, Stiffed, acting for Troma Studios and working with Lloyd Kaufman, writing comedy and scripts, and a bunch of other topics guaranteed to tickle your curiosity. You won't want to miss this one. Alright friends, episode 2 is in the can. I hope you got something good out of it. Thank you so much for listening, and remember, stay curious, never stop asking questions, and keep your heart open. Peace.